Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Football Update. This is Andy.
And this is Robin.
So, very exciting stuff. We're getting closer to the playoffs. 2 weeks left. A lot of things can happen in the next few weeks. But before we get into that, Robin, big news from Denver. What's going on?
Yeah, so I think it was a day or two ago it was reported by Jordan Schultz and Josina Anderson that the right after earlier in the week he was told that he was being benched for Jarrett Stidham, that apparently Russell Wilson was told after they had won 2 games in a row, started 1-5, then won against the Packers and Chiefs, that big upset win against Kansas City. He was told that if he did not defer his $37 million injury guarantee from this upcoming 2024 offseason to the 2025 offseason, he would be benched for the remainder of the year. The NFLPA, his agents, other people got involved. Meanwhile, he was still winning quite enough games to get him to 6-5, and now they've fallen apart a little bit since then. But just a very odd and weird situation. It's kind of clear that Sean Payne was kind of there to rebuild the team in his own image and probably get a guy that can do some more stuff on his type of offense, whereas Russ is more of a out of structure creator and not, in the pocket guy. Just a very odd situation with them, and it feels like they wanted to defer the injury guarantee, so that would make it easier for Russ to be on the roster, but also easier if they wanted to get out of it to be able to get out of the contract. So
by them doing this, specifically, what will that do for his contract? Because I know they'll eat the dead cap, but they were saying somehow it make it manageable, they said?
Yeah, kind of manageable, palatable. Essentially, it's an $85 million dead cap hit if they were to do it for March. What they'll probably do is cut them, but designate it as a June 1st cut so that it counts something like, I think it was $49.6 million or something, or like 38 million. So yes, it'll count against the cap, and they won't get any cap relief until June 1st, but that's essentially what would happen. Whereas if they did in March, it would be an $85 million dead cap hit, which would be the biggest in the league. Both him and Deshaun Watson were at 2020 playing pretty much as great quarterbacking as anyone that first half of 2020, with Russ just going off. I think it was like 26 touchdowns in 8 games, and then Watson led the league in passing yards. And a few years later, they're with new teams and thought of as 2 of the bigger trade failures for those teams. If you had, I'll let you go for a bit. Yeah.
And I was going to say, we're going to talk about the Browns in a second, because we're going to talk about the game on Thursday. For me, the trade itself with the Broncos and Seahawks, it wasn't so bad itself. It's just even before we saw a single play, they gave them that extension, which was shouldn't you should see what you got with him before you do something. Yeah. Whereas, again, we're going to talk about the Browns more in depth. They gave them that fully guaranteed contract as an offer with the trade.
Yeah.
But very odd. So, who do you think the Broncos might go? They might try to get someone in the draft, or you might think they might try to pick someone up?
I feel like there's 3 guys, and in the offseason there'll be more debate about this, but there's basically 3 guys that could go top 10. If they could go top 10, they could go top 5. This past year we had Bryce, Stroud, and Richardson go in the top 4, and this year it'll be Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Jane Daniels, the Heisman winner. So if they want to get one of those 3, they're going to have to make an astronomical trade offer to go up. I don't know if that's possible. Maybe they get Penix from Washington or Bo Nix from Oregon. I can't remember who suggested, but someone suggested they, either sign Jameson free agency or work something out with New Orleans, because New Orleans has a million cap issues of their own, and they probably can't afford to keep Winston going forward.
I mean, if they're smart, they should get Sean's baby and Taysom Hill. Yeah, just I a little off base about it. I love seeing Taysom Hill play.
Yeah.
So okay. So from one draft trade that was a complete bust, I still think the worst is the one with the Browns, because that was fully guaranteed.
Yeah.
And this Browns team is just, in a good way, flabbergasting me. Your best running back is out for the season, other injuries. Watson goes out, was playing terrible, and they were still trucking along.
Yeah.
Just for the defense was. Joe Flacco comes in, and somehow he's back to his Super Bowl year form. Like what is going on with Joe Flacco in your opinion? Like, what is this?
It's weird because it's like this is the quarterback that somehow unlocked the deep shot offense with Kevin Stefanski, and there are a lot of it's like no risk it, no biscuit, which Bruce Arians always used to say, which was, take big shots and risk turnovers. And a lot of coaches aren't that way. So I think Flacco, it's like 11 or 12 turnovers in the 5 games that he's played, but he's making more than enough big plays to make up for it at this point. I don't know about against the playoff teams if that will work as well, but he did it with Noah Amari Cooper on Thursday night against Jets defense that's given a lot of quarterbacks problems, a lot of great quarterbacks problems. So, Njoku in the middle of the field making plays. Elijah Moore, the former Jet, I think he's in concussion protocol after he got hit on Thursday, so we'll see if he's back. But that was probably the most impressive of those wins, because the other ones you could go with Flacco, 2 or 3 turnovers here. I think he had 4 against the Bears, but led that comeback. And, if he keeps playing this way, they do have a chance to be very good. Their home and away splits on defense. Their defense is much better at home than away. So that's a little bit concerning if they don't get the 1 seed, which is still out there if Baltimore were to lose to Miami this weekend and Pittsburgh in the final week. But if Baltimore were to win, I'd almost think Cleveland would be better off just resting their starters that final weekend, just to get everyone healthy and ready for that wild card game. But yeah, Kevin Stefanski, I can't really think of anyone better for Coach of the Year. Shane Steichen's done a great job, but I don't know if the Colts will make it in. Whereas I think Stefanski has done an incredible job with 4 different quarterbacks and the Nick Chubb injury and everything else going on with them.
Should there be a little cause for concern that in the second, the total was 37-20 in the game on Thursday? Was it just maybe the Jets were kind of getting pissed off that so much, and they just decided, you know what, we're not going to let this happen anymore?
I think it was both of those things going on, and also Elijah Moore getting hurt late in that first half. So you had both your top receivers out against a pretty well-rounded secondary, and they were to get some big chunks in the run game, partially in the second half, but mostly in the first half. And then I think the Jets kind of clamped down and took away those big chunk plays that were killing them. So that was just harder for them to move up and down the field. And then you just didn't want to risk turnovers, because there was the pick 6 that Flacco had on that great play by Jermaine Johnson. But I think they tried to, once they had a big enough lead, just don't turn the ball over and don't let Trevor Siemian beat you.
And then on the flip side of that game, you had the Jets. They're starting to show what Breece Hall can do for that team. Wilson and Garrett Wilson sometimes. The thing, and again, it's been a very frustrating year with the Jets, but it's like watching the past few weeks. Like I know Zach Wilson is not what they intended, but like the games I've watched the past few weeks, it's like their offensive line is atrocious.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It's just like, and it's just you don't really like them like me. I think just because they are the Jets, you still feel for them. And from the sounds of it, they are going to keep Saleh and the GM.
Yeah.
But I think this is it next year, because the rumors they're doubling down again. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if they try to make a swing for Devontae Adams if I'm a betting man. And I hope they don't, or maybe trade later on, because they need to draft the linemen.
Yeah.
I think they'll be in the top 10 next year. But, like, you really want Rodgers to try to take you guys to the promised land. And you got to get, a lineman. And I don't know, but, like, I think if you don't go to the Super Bowl next year, or win a couple games in the playoffs, I think that whole regime in New York is done, just because you put all this cap space in, you made a big move for Rodgers and followed all of Rodgers' demands. And again, their defense is incredible, but I bet they're beyond frustrated by now. Like, they've been one of the 5 defenses in the past 3 years, and the offense can't throw them out of a paper bag.
Yeah, they're kind of at a unique spot this offseason and the coming offseason, just because they have so much invested, not only the money and the contract and the picks, but also just doing anything and everything to please Aaron Rodgers. And that, even without the Rodgers injury, kind of cost them, because Alan Lazard clearly, it's been active a couple games this year, and the games that he's not in, you see guys like Jason Brownlee and Xavier Gipson making plays, and you're like, why can't Alan Lazard do that week to week? And they're stuck with that contract at least another year. Every time you see Robert Saleh at the podium after a loss, it's, he's just despondent. And there was that weird exchange where there was Rich Cimini of ESPN and was trying to ask, why aren't you more angry and demonstrative? And he basically was like, do you want me to throw the podium or something? So, yeah. Which is, it was kind of a dumb question tax exchange, but you can just tell that there's a lot of frustration built up there. And then, what do you do in the offseason with Aaron Rodgers? Do you do more of what he wants because he's like the one thing you have going for you, or do you try and push back and be like, no, we're not going to have Tim Boyle or a guy that you like as a backup quarterback. We need a guy that can actually play like a Jacoby Brissett or Gardner Minshew, and that would mean putting more cap space into that, trying to figure out your O-line, and, like the young studs you're bringing up, like the Breece Hallses and Garrett Wilsons, those guys, they'll be up for, potential contract extensions in a year. Same with Sauce Gardner and some of the defensive stars that you have. So, it's going to be maybe some rough sledding if they don't get it together. And if they're bringing back that whole coaching staff, I mean, is there anything we've seen beside, he's Aaron Rodgers' buddy, that makes you think that Nate Hackett can actually create a functioning enough offense to win much of anything in a loaded AFC? I haven't seen it.
Again, the only caveat I'll give them is we never got really to see Rodgers play with that offense. So maybe the cheat code for Hackett, or only for Hackett's offenses to work, is to have Rodgers kind of like how, like, again, I'm not comparing him to Andy Reid, but Andy Reid always was a great coordinator, a head coach. He just never won until he had a player like Holmes to unlock his scheme. So maybe it's, but I think we'll end by saying definitely it's going to be a make or break year for the Jets next year. Moving to the playoff race, we thought we could go to the seeding. Right now, 49ers are number 1. You have the Eagles at number 2 right now, both 11-4. The Lions are 11-4. Cowboys are 10-5. Who both are playing tonight. We'll get into that in a second. Number 4 is the Bucs at 8-7, and number 6 and number 7 are both from the NFC West. Kind of this conference's AFC North. Got the Rams and the Seahawks. Both at like I said, at 8-7, and behind them you got the Vikings and Packers, who are both 7-8. This is the interesting thing. Both of them are this game tomorrow. They're both playing each other. Will give them any chance, because if the Vikings lose, they're at a 4% chance, and the Packers lose, they're at a 1% chance. And, of course, the Saints and Falcons are still kind of in it because of the NFC South.
Yeah.
Saints playing Tampa Bay and the Falcons playing Chicago. And somehow Chicago's statistically still in it.
Yeah.
Less than 1%. But if they win, Robin may get a 1% chance to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
On the NFC side, I personally think that even though anything can happen, I kind of think that the NFC side is set. Like if the season ended today, like next week, I think this is the teams that are going to make it. Just the Rams are playing the Giants.
Yeah.
Seahawks are playing Pittsburgh in Seattle.
Yeah.
And if it was in Pittsburgh, I'd give it maybe 50-50 because of how deep the Steelers are. But you're playing in one of the toughest stadiums to play in. And then the Buccaneers are actually playing the Saints.
Yeah.
So if the Saints, now I forget, did they play each other already?
Yes, and it was in New Orleans. I think it was week 4. Yeah, I think it was week 4, and the Buccaneers, I think, won like 30-6 or 31-6 or something like that.
So they would kind of talk. So if the Saints have any chance of getting the division, I think they have to win that game.
Yeah.
And then, so what about you? Do you think any changes? Maybe to the position of the East?
I think the one big elimination game, there's two. There's the Buccaneers and Saints that you mentioned. And I think with it home field with the Buccaneers and the Saints kind of having a lot of injuries, no Marshawn Lattimore, no Ryan Ramczyk at right tackle, no Michael Thomas not there still. I like Tampa's chances there, and then Minnesota and Green Bay. Vikings starting 25-year-old rookie Jaron Hall because they had a lot of turnovers and not a lot of scoring with Josh Dobbs, and then they had some pretty good amount of scoring but a lot of turnovers with Nick Mullins. So it's kind of like, well, if you're not starting the young guy because you're worried about turnovers, both guys ahead of him have those same problems, so might as well see what he has. Even though they're technically in contention, it's, very odd to go to the young guy this late in the game, but I do think they want to see what he has. And then Green Bay, they've had a few health issues, but especially Watson at receiver, but Jordan Love has played pretty well since that some early troubles. They had the weird situation with Jair Alexander where now he's suspended a game because...
I get what he did, but you've got Justin Jefferson back. Rasul Douglas is gone now, so... Yeah. Very, very crazy. So tonight's game, Cowboys-Lions, who do you think's going to win that? I believe it's in Detroit.
No, it's in Dallas, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, it is in Dallas.
Yeah.
I apologize. Yes, it is in Dallas.
Yeah, they've won their last 15 at home. They're coming off a couple tough road losses. They need to be the more physical team, and that means Tony Pollard doing well in the run game and also stopping Detroit's run game and, being able to get Jared Goff and that Lions offense into 3rd and long, 2nd and long, and get the pressure with those guys on the D-line with DeMarcus Lawrence and Micah Parsons, because as we've seen with both the Bills and Dolphins the last 2 weeks, if you get a running game going, you can take away that pass rush with Micah Parsons pretty easily. So I do think with that home crowd behind them that they do enough to win that game. They average 40 points a game at home, and they might need that if Detroit's offense is successful to win. But I like Dallas's chances just a little more, although the Lions are a dome team too, so there's no field advantage per se, but there is that massive home crowd, and they just seem to feed off that energy for whatever reason.
Absolutely. Now, hypothetically, let's say Cowboys win, and I don't think this is going to happen. If the Eagles lose to Arizona and they're both 11-5, who would take the division at that point? Because they both won one. now, if I remember correctly.
I think there's some other tiebreaker that goes to besides.
I just can't remember the tiebreakers at the moment.
Yeah, so I think it would go to the Eagles if they both have the same record. I do like the Eagles' chances against the Cardinals team that Kyler Murray missed 2 or 3 days of practice with an illness, so he's questionable. He still might be able to play. We'll see. Hollywood Brown has had a heel injury down the stretch, and they put him on IR. I want to say Thursday or Friday, so he's definitely not playing on Sunday, and they already aren't loaded at receiver to begin with. So, and they released one of their corners drafted in 2021 this week as well, so not a lot of depth there, and they're coming off, kind of a blowout loss to Chicago, and then, they just don't match up roster-wise, and I think the Eagles, going against their old defensive coordinator in Philadelphia, they'll probably want to put a pretty big performance to kind of end Arizona. Although Arizona might not mind, or at least fan base might not mind losing a couple games and securing one of the 2 top draft spots.
Yeah, and if the season ended today, this is the fascinating thing. The season, and that would be Matt Stafford back to point.
Yeah, that would be so fun.
The NFC is going to be very fascinating because you've got 2 NFC West teams that I think, despite how good the 49ers are, could potentially beat the 49ers just because they are division rivals. So
yeah.
The NFC is a very exciting playoff race. Moving to the AFC side, right now you have 3 teams officially in the playoffs. The Ravens won at 12-3, Dolphins second seed at 11-4, the Browns 11-5, and they're the 5th seed. And right now you have the Chiefs at 9-6, 3rd seed. Then you have the Jaguars at the 4th seed that are 8-7. You got our Bills at 9-6 in the 6th seed, and then you have the Colts who are playing the Raiders, and the Raiders are still kind of trying to fight it in, even though they're kind of far behind in the teams that are left. And then outside in the bubble, you have the Texans who are 8-7, Bengals 8-7, Steelers 7, Raiders 7-8, and Broncos 7-8. So first and foremost, we got to send a fruit basket to the Raiders before they we were talking about this before we did the podcast, guys. If they're playing in Baltimore, they're really hot right now, and Jalen Waddle is out. They're playing the Dolphins tomorrow. Now, if the Ravens beat the Dolphins and if the Bills beat the Jets, the Patriots. We were talking about the Jets earlier. Next week, we'll decide the AFC East. And if the Bills win, we would get the 2nd seed because we have beaten the Chiefs. And again, thanks to the Raiders, we're now tied in the head-to-head record.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts on the seeding, Robin, and the teams? And do you think it'll change with how it's looking right now?
Yeah, there's a lot of teams that are competing against each other, that are playing each other. We have the Colts and the Raiders, and Colts kind of slowing down a little bit, especially that big loss against Atlanta, getting beat up in that game. They did not have Michael Pittman, who's back this week, but they're playing a Raiders team that defensively has just been super dynamite, only allowed 3 points against Minnesota, was dominating for the most part against the Chargers, and then scored 2 defensive touchdowns against the Chiefs. So if the Raiders can get that W, they increase there's however small chance of making the playoffs and put, the Colts in trouble. In the AFC South, it does feel like Jacksonville still has a decent advantage, but they, unfortunately this weekend, even with the 4-game losing streak, they still were in a decent spot, and now Trevor Lawrence dealing with before the high ankle sprain, then the concussion, going through that protocol, and now he has a sprained AC joint, sprained shoulder, and he will miss this one, so C.J. Beathard will play against Carolina. If they somehow win that one...
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's...
Yeah.
Do you think they could beat the Panthers without Lawrence? Because they have been playing a little off.
Yeah. If they come up with... They're at home for this one, so if they, can actually use the run game, get some other things going, and the pass rush led by the other Josh Allen does really well, then I think they have a decent shot at it. Now, if Bryce Young plays like he did against Green Bay, although Joe Barry coordinated Green Bay defense has allowed a lot of quarterbacks to have their best game this year, then it could be another win for Carolina, and that would make it very difficult, not impossible, but very difficult to get into the playoff. They do have the tiebreaker advantages, I think, against Jacksonville and Houston, so that helps them a lot if they all have the same record. But I think a win somehow with Beathard is possible. 1 and 2 is their best chance of getting into the postseason. And I think Cleveland probably has the inside track on the 5 seed, assuming Baltimore gets it done against Miami, which I think they're at home. No Waddle, as you said, and the last time Miami was up there, they had a decent lead, and then they let Tua throw for, I think, 5 second-half touchdowns early last year. So I think they're going to be wary of that. Kyle Hamilton's going to be wary of that because he's become one of the best safeties in the league. And that was a game he got miscommunication a couple times, and he was on the back end of a couple big touchdowns for Miami. So if they can, just take away the big play for Miami, they can make it a long day with how versatile that defense is. And Mike McDonald is probably the defensive-minded defensive coordinator on the coaching market that people are going to fawn all over for head coaching opportunities, even though the league has pivoted more to an offensive-minded approach.
And for the 7th seed in the AFC, I'm 50-50 because you want to have the Bills get in as soon as possible. Like, the general football fan of me kind of wants both the Colts and Texans to win this weekend because they're in the final, in the last regular season game. So that could that potential game to fight the 7th. Oh, it would be a game to determine the 7th seed. So that's enjoyable. Now, onto the Bills. They win tomorrow, and there's 12 different 12 different scenarios that the Bills can get their spot confirmed for the playoffs. All of them, they have to win it, if I remember correctly. And then the easy one is they would win, and then the Chiefs would have to beat the Bengals, and the Seahawks would have to beat the Steelers. And then I think one of the other scenarios, if one of those teams wins and doesn't lose, is like Jacksonville would have to lose. Or something.
Yeah.
So, very exciting. I mean, we would love the 2nd seed, but the most important part is you do have to win tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Because, if you lose it, like right now our playoff percentage is 89, you go to a 47%. And if you win, it's 97%. So, yeah, very important tomorrow. Just lastly, before we go, what's going on with the Chiefs? They've lost back at home.
Yeah.
I mean, they did play in New England, but we're mentioning back-to-back in Arrowhead, which hasn't happened, I think, ever with Mahomes.
Yeah, very, very odd game on Christmas Day. It was on the Nickelodeon broadcast, which, again, was a fun cast, but it wasn't a fun performance by Kansas City. They have 2 plays in a row. They have that weird, Andy Reid's known for his great trick plays that mostly work, but when they don't, they can look really bad. And he had the one where it snaps to Pacheco, they hand off to Mahomes, and for whatever reason, there's a fumble exchange, gets recovered by the Raiders for a touchdown. Then they have the pick six, the great play by Jack Jones, who's had a pick six in the last 2 games. And as we talked, the Raiders, I think they have a top 5 defense since Antonio Pierce has been the interim coach. And then they just don't have any explosive guys, and if they do, they've been banged up. Pacheco's been banged up some this year. Tony, when he's able to stay on side, he's had a couple moments here and there, but it's been a rough year for him compared to the end of last year. Sky Moore was a second round guy in the 2022 draft that people were big on, and for a reason hasn't worked in Kansas City. Rashee Rice, the rookie, has been their most dependable guy.
He's been phenomenal.
Yep, MVS had that big contract he signed. The first year looked pretty decent, and this year it's just been rough for him. And Travis Kelce, definitely banged up since the start of the year and just doesn't look anywhere near as effective. And Mahomes is trying to compensate for it, and he's not able to as easily. And then the big thing is the offensive tackle situation. They signed Donovan Smith after he's cut from the Buccaneers. They gave Jawan Taylor a bunch of money to be the right tackle, and he's not able to always consistently line up correctly or be a great pass blocker. And as a result, again, it's Mahomes is feeling that pressure, and he's not reacting well to it. And emotionally, it seems like a little bit off this year, not carrying the same swagger, a lot of frustration more than anything. Defensively, they're good enough where if Mahomes was playing at an MVP level, they would be a Super Bowl contender, but I think he's just not able to at this point. Cincinnati game this weekend's interesting because I think they win, they clinch their division, they're in the postseason, but Bengals have won 3 out of the last 4 against Kansas City, and again, it is Browning, not Burrow, but I think Chase is playing, Higgins is playing, Boyd is playing. That's tough receiving core to cover. L'Jarius Sneed's been one of the best corners in the league, and he's questionable with something. I can't remember exactly what, but you're hoping he's able to play for them because him and McDuffie make a great tandem of top-end corners. So, yeah.
Also, though, you've got Chase kind of running his mouth for...
Yeah.
You never want to give the other team incentive. And
yeah.
The only reason why I think it will go Kansas City, like they're a team that's very prideful. I don't think they want three games at Arrowhead in a row.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
Very excited. And lastly, just to touch on the Bills quickly, some good news. Daquan Jones.
Yeah.
Right, and Micah's playing tomorrow. Hopefully they'll limit his playing just to get back into it because, other than Elliott, the Pats don't really seem to have too many great weapons. Like, they've had an injury-ridden season. So, yeah, some very exciting games, and that Lions-Cowboys game is going to be very exciting for tonight.
Yeah.
And then next week, guys, will probably be a short episode just going over the last couple games that could potentially decide the playoffs and just maybe some pride games for teams that are always fun to watch.
Yeah.
But, yeah, this was a football update. This is Andy.
And this is Robin. Happy holidays and upcoming new year.
Yeah,